Very much for joining us. Bonsoir tout le monde. My name is John Cartwright. I'm the chair of the Council of Canadians. I'm speaking to you from the traditional territories of the Mississaugas of the Credit, in a region that's been part of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Covenant between the Haudenosaunee, the Huron-Wendat, and the Anishinaabe peoples. And I know we're gathered here on treaty lands and unceded territories from sea to sea to sea. Thank you very much for being here with us. This is a Council of Canadians, as many of you know, have been around since 1985. This is our 40th year, and we're doing this tonight in collaboration with our partners from Quebec, Eau Secours, and our national partners, the Canadian Union of Public Employees. Want to invite you to put in the chat where you're at this moment, and also if there is a special water source that you are connected to, a lake, a river, a sea, that means something special to you, because this is about water, defending the water, protecting the water. We have a wonderful panel to present tonight with Gabrielle Roy from the Eau Secours, Angella McEwen from the Canadian Union of Public Employees, Garry John from the Statliam Nation in BC, and Maude Barlow, who needs no introduction. We're going to start with Maude, and then after a first round, we're going to show you a lovely video from a good friend, Leo Chevry, from a series that the Canadian Public Employees did of Water of Life with their own Indigenous circles to speak to what water means to all of us. Maude, as you know, was the chair of the Council of Canadians for many years, as an acclaimed author, became a special envoy of the United Nations on issues around water, and is globally known as a leader on this topic. And we're going to ask Maude to start us off with a bit of a history of water in Canada and the struggles around the world on water. Maude Barlow.
Well, thank you, John, and hello, everybody. Amazing to see. I was watching the names come on. This is just wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm speaking to you from my home in Ottawa, which is unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. And thinking of this in the 40th year of the Council of Canadians' existence, it led me back to how I got involved in the water issue. So I'm going to start there, because it was 1985, and I was reading the Canada-US Free Trade Agreement over and over and over, and I looked at the annex at the end that listed all the goods that were to be traded or to be ruled by the new trade agreements rather than governments, really. And they're among things like, running shoes and, whatever, was water in all its forms, including ice and snow. And I could not understand for the life of me what water was doing in there. And that started me on a journey which has taken me all over the world on trying to fight for water protection, and the human right to water. So having water as defined as a good, tradable good, was bad enough. But then there was a clause in that trade agreement called proportional sharing. Now, it was mainly originally for energy, but it also applied to water. And that is, if any province had started to commercially export its water, that would have been very hard to turn the tap off. And then when Mexico joined and it became NAFTA, they included a clause called ISDS, where corporations are able to sue the governments of another country. And Canada has paid out several $100 million for having the audacity to have some regulations protecting our water and environment and so on. So that started me on a path, asking myself, who is making the decisions around water? What are the politics of water? And I learned three really important things. The first thing I want to share with you. First of all, we are a planet running out of accessible fresh water. I know we were all taught back in grade 6 that's not possible, but when you divert and pollute and abuse the water that we have, it is absolutely true. In fact, the United Nations says within this decade, the amount of the demand for water will outstrip supply by about 40%, which, if you think of it, is just an astounding statistic. And that leads, of course, to the second thing that we all need to know, and that is that it's arguable that the lack of access to fresh water and sanitation is perhaps the greatest human rights abuse or violation of our time. a quarter of the planet's population does not have adequate access to water still after all we've all done. And a half of the population of the world does not have adequate access to sanitation. So when COVID hit and we were all told, wash your hands with soap and warm water, that wasn't possible for half of the population. And then the third thing I learned, which was true then, but way more true now, is that knowing that this is a dwindling supply of water, demand going up, supply going down, that there was going to be a mighty contest between those who see water as a commodity to be put on the open market like oil and gas, to be, let the market decide what happens to it, and those of us who believe water is a human right, a public trust, and a commons. And that was a very, very big struggle. I'm just writing a new book actually on the financialization of nature and water. And I have to tell you, it has advanced in some places way more quickly than I like. The marketization, water trading, water futures trading, and so on. So, this is an issue that's going on as we speak. So we set out to build a movement here in Canada and globally. As I said, I remember just traveling all over the world. You kind of land in some place and be picked up by somebody you've never met, but you love them because you just share a value and you share a worldview, right? And it culminated in many ways in the 2010 recognition by the United Nations, recognizing the human rights to water and sanitation, because it hadn't been included in the 1948 UN Declaration on Human Rights, because it wasn't an issue then, but it was a huge issue by the time we finally rolled around to getting it recognized. Here in Canada, of course, there have been and are many struggles. First, most important to mention are the Indigenous rights and the situation in First Nations around the lack of water and sanitation. What I call the myth of abundance, which is Canadians tend to think we have so much water we can dump it whatever we want in it, we can move it wherever we want, it'll never run out. And I assure you that's not true. We have fought successfully against several abuses of our water. One was commercial exports, including two very big ones through the 60s, 70s, and 80s. This was a plan that was supported by Premier Bourassa and eventually Chrétien. The one was called the Grand, and it would have diverted water to force south into the Great Lakes from northern Quebec, and the other was called the Nawapa, and it would have brought water down from northern Alberta through a series of nuclear mechanisms to bring water to the United States. In 1998, the provincial government in Ontario gave a license to a company to sell Lake Superior water to Saudi Arabia, and there was another proposal from Newfoundland. We shut them all down. This was a really powerful group that we put together, a movement that we put together. And then around 2007, Stephen Harper decided he wanted to force privatization on water, on municipalities. So any municipality needing to upgrade its water services, infrastructure, and so on would not get federal funding unless they went to a public-private partnership. So the Council of Canadians and CUPE got together and said, this is not on. And we worked together to launch what we call water watch committees in towns and cities to watch the water. And we launched the Blue Communities Project. And the Blue Communities Project was to ask municipalities to pledge to protect their water as a public trust and under governance, public governance, and to promote and protect water as a human right. And I think there are close to 50 towns and cities now in Canada that have become a blue community. It was a very successful project, and we basically won that fight here in Canada. There are only a few wastewater services that are still privately run, but I mean, at one point we were looking at maybe this going across the country, so we were really successful. Then Blue Community spread. It was spread to Europe, big cities like Paris and Berlin and Brussels have become blue cities, blue communities, and universities. We think there are now something like 25 million people living in official blue community cities. The World Council of Churches became a blue community. And we more recently have added the whole project of bringing the story to kids in schools from K to 12. And we've designed a beautiful website, which I think you'd love if you go on the council site, called Blue Community Schools, which gives great information to teachers and parents and students around water and the human right to water and the politics of water. But also we ask schools if they want to become certified as blue schools. So go to the website and find that. I think you'll love it. Another win for us was when NAFTA was renegotiated to the Canada-US-Mexico agreement. They dropped the provision allowing corporations to sue, which was a really big thing. And they took out proportional sharing of water, of all of our resources, these were things that we were very, very worried about. And that was a small win in a big package that we didn't like. Although I think it's really important to say that water is still a tradable good in most of the trade agreements, and when it's transferred from water, free-flowing water, to a good such as bottled water or something called embedded water, virtual water, that's the water that you need to produce something that you then export away. That water becomes a good, and Canada is a net exporter of virtual water, and it's something we don't take into account when we think, where is the water? Who's using it? Where is it going? It becomes privatized in that way. In fact, there are so many ways in which water is privatized today in terms of water trading. You've got Australia, you've got Chile, you've got the southern United States. We've got water futures trading now. We have water pollution trading, where in Chesapeake Bay in the United States, they're actually able to continue, big factory farm corporations are able to continue to pollute Chesapeake Bay, but they trade their credits with somebody else somewhere else, and then they're able to say, well, somewhere, somehow they did something okay to offset what they're doing. So the fight around keeping water in public hands is democratically controlled is incredibly important. And now we have the, excuse me, the greatest threat in a long time, I would say, and I'll speak a little more to this in the roundtable section of this, and that is Donald Trump, who has no moral compass, does not respect the law in his own country or internationally, so do these free trade agreements even mean anything, and only understands the language of force. He has set his sights on annexing Canada and claiming our minerals and our water to power his industrial and technological revolution. And you know that he sees the world broken up into blocks. Russia can look after its block. Trump is looking after what he sees as his block. And he has Canada on the brain. He's got water on the brain. He wants our water, right? And so it's very important that we come up with ways to come together to say that this is not going to be allowed to happen. As I say, I'll have more to say in the next session, but we really must not allow that to happen. And we need to be very clear about protecting water in this territory, both from that kind of abuse, but from abuse that comes within, because it's really important for us to understand there's lots of abuse happening right now in Canada, lots of profit being made from extractive industries and so on that is destroying water. So this has given us, I think, as a people, a way to come together. And I'm really welcoming this event this evening and saying thank you for joining us and being part of this, and feeling hopeful that the work that we've done so far, particularly in this country, we can continue to do together.
Thanks, Maude. That's such a wonderful background. It reminds us of the passion why so many of us got involved in this struggle, and including in the Council of Canadians. What we do know is that in English Canada, we seldom understand the amazing history and legacy of environmental, climate, and water work in Quebec. And I'm going to invite Gabrielle Roy-Gregoire to tell us a little bit about the work of Eau Secours. Gabrielle?
Thanks, John. Bonsoir tout le monde. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining tonight. Thanks for being here. So yes, like John said, I'm calling from Montreal City in Quebec, the unceded territory of the Garin-Gahaga Nation. And I work for Eau Secours. I've been working there for about a year and a half. Eau Secours is an organization that was born out of the struggles against privatization of the water services in the city of Montreal. So by its very nature, Eau Secours has always been mobilized for the human rights to water, the protection of the ecosystem integrity, and against any form of privatization, commodification, and financialization of water. Our story begins in 1997 when the city of Montreal, the government of Quebec, and the private companies were negotiating to sell water services. And these negotiations became public thanks to the union, including CUPE, who leaked the information about the negotiation. And that led to a spectacular mobilization that brought together actors from the research community, the unions, artists, and the medias. And from this gathering of actors, a coalition was born and was called Eau Secours. And so we won that fight. Since then, water management has never been handed over to the private sector in Quebec. There are no public-private partnership in water services in Quebec, which is a huge win for us. And the coalition has continued its commitment after that victory because we had other major things to do. There is a fight against bottled water, other privatization, against the fluoridation. And so these campaigns kind of sustained the coalition until 2010, and that's when we became an NGO. And a key factor for Eau Secours is that we're not a very large organization, and that works for us because instead we work with existing movement and we accelerate their progress, especially by providing citizen support. So we'll work with the citizens and other movements. A notable example of citizen victory for water was a movement that we called CUPE chez nous, which kind of directly translate as don't leak here, don't leak in our place, on our territory, but it's a bit less possessive than our land. And that basically stopped several oil and gas projects in the Saint Laurent Valley, and eventually indirectly led to a law passed in 2022 that ended all hydrocarbon exploration and production in Quebec. So to advance our water issues, Eau Secours usually works closely with the government to approve public policies, and we're currently sitting on the Water Forum, the Water Action Forum. And we carry the Blue Community Project here in Quebec. We're now at 45 or 43 Blue communities in the province, something like that.
Great, thank you for that. Next, we have Angella McEwen. Angela's with the Canadian Union of Public Employees, and 25 years ago, Paul Moyse, the president of CUPE, and Maude crisscrossed the country with the Water Watch campaign, as she mentioned. And we helped stop the privatization of water in every part of this country. Angella, you are deeply enmeshed in that CUPE history. Please tell us a bit about it.
Yes, thanks. So CUPE has a really interesting history of linking public water to human rights, so that there is a human right, as Maude was saying, to have democratic control over clean water and wastewater, so the sanitation. And we partnered with the Council of Canadians and with communities to fight back and protect that across Canada. And we've partnered more recently with Indigenous communities to highlight those concerns and to have a campaign around making sure that we can continue to win this fight. As Maude said, you know, we've won to some extent, but it's always under attack. There's always municipalities can't borrow money in the same way that other levels of government can. And lots of times this water is sitting at the municipal level. And so there's always pressure for them to privatize it when they need to make big investments in it. And so there's always this pressure, and we really need people to be paying attention to it, especially right now, because again, as Maude said, there's under CUSMA, the protection of water is not clear. There is a side letter that says it's sort of protected, but there's also something in the agreement that says it's a tradable good. So if somebody decides to start trading it, then that protection of water in its natural state is gone. And so it's really important for us to be aware of that and be aware of kind of how precarious that win that we had is to maintain.
Thanks, Angela. Garry, John, please talk to us a little bit about the history of Indigenous peoples and water in this
Good
land.
afternoon, good evening. It's good to see so many familiar names coming up in the chat. Um, been working with Maude and the council for several years. I sat on the national board for several years, and we were able to do some great solidarity and outreach work with different peoples. Anyways, you know, my late great friend Art Manuel always talked about Aboriginal title and how it's underlined in nature and it has a proprietary interest. It's interesting. I went to speak to the United Nations Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. And it was on one of those trips we were coming back and we landed in, I can't remember where it was, Colorado probably. And there was a news flash that Canada had just adopted the United Nations Declaration on Rights of Indigenous People. Well, it was great and glorious for about 2 minutes because we knew that back at Ottawa, there was people quickly scrambling to try and figure out how they could whittle down the Declaration on Rights of Indigenous People so they didn't have to change any policies or laws to accommodate what the Declaration says about it. So that means we had to take things to the courts, we had to take things to the streets and demonstrate. On several occasions we've had to do that. In my territory, we have the Stadling title, the Declaration of the Ulua Tribe, which states that we're the rightful owners of our territory and everything pertaining to. And that's a premise that we will approach many issues on all 11 communities that make up the nation. And we quickly remind governments on several occasions, different components of the law that they're required to follow, whether it's case law or things that we're putting in front of them. And more or less how it doesn't seem to fall in line with the policies that the province and or the federal government has in place. So that's been one of our biggest challenges, watching what the Canadian government is doing and what the provincial government is doing. And it's a tireless, endless battle. I'm somewhat removed from that those issues for the time being, but never fail to get up and support the people who are on the front lines, whether it's here in our territory or in our neighboring territories across BC or across Canada. But we always say that Aboriginal title may be the last piece of, maybe the last stone that we can throw at the courts or companies and corporations that are doing their utmost to undermine the right to water.
Thanks, Garry. Leo Chevery was an activist on the East Coast, Indigenous, Council of Canadians, and CUPE member. And there's a wonderful series of videos that CUPE has created called Water is Life. And I'd like to share it now, the video of Leo Chevery.
Dawn Bell Rose. My pronouns are she and her. And I'm coming
No, I
to
think
you
we're looking for
from...
the Leo Chevery one.
One second.
Okay. And while we're waiting for that to come up, I just want to thank CUPE for creating that space that would allow those voices to come so powerfully. Really, really important work. And we do know that south of the border, what Elon Musk is doing to public employees is just shameful. And it's one of the things we're very worried about as we're in this dynamic now of Trump saying he wants to come for Canada as the 51st state and for our water in particular. And some of you may have seen this sticker that was created about 38 years ago. Many of us wore it at the time. They'll be out in the mail shortly. So let's go to Leo.
Chevery. I am a member of CUPE Local 1870, where I'm past president, which is the UPEI support staff employees. I currently sit on the CUPE Indigenous Council, and I've been privileged to be part of that council for a long time. My job actually is, I work as a library technician at Robertson Library at UPEI, and I've worked there since 1985. I grew up surrounded by water, and water has been an important aspect of my life always. I come from a fishing family, And Prince Edward Island depends solely on groundwater for its drinking water. And so it's very vulnerable in terms of access to water and the purity of water. Seeing it on PEI, I've seen small farms be replaced by large monocultural farms and using a lot of pesticides or other chemicals which run off into waterways and made them anoxic. So there's a lot of bodies of water that I grew up with, including Diligent Pond, which is close to my home, that has become anoxic, and I see that destruction of fish and other things there. I've seen the fact is that where my family used to go dig clams or gather other things, now you cannot do it in some of those places. And with the pollution we have through agricultural, monocultural potato production, among other things, is that nitrates are building up in our water table. Once we start extracting from deep water wells, and even in municipal water supplies, sometimes the winter river that supplies Charlottetown goes dry in the summer, that actually some brooks or streams dry up. Big corporate entities like Irving's are pushing for deep water wells, and that's been a huge issue on PEI. We also have this amazing number of watershed groups that are doing a lot of things to protect water and making sure that we can actually bring fish back where they've disappeared. I think there's so many things where people can come together. I certainly know that there are lots of allies that can come together. For example, I know that for generations in Nova Scotia, they had a paper mill that was actually destroying the water supply and the water resources of Pictou Landing. Like environmental racism is the only explanation I can find, like how they got away with polluting that community's water for so long. And so a lot of people like fishers, community members, Indigenous communities from throughout the Maritimes came together and said, this needs to be stopped. The more momentum we have of working together, the more we can make a difference. Another thing I was privileged to attend was a protest in Nova Scotia that people came together there to say, we don't want any drilling in the Gulf of St. Lawrence. There was a really strong push to drill just off the coast of Île-et-Madeleine. We know that one spill there could destroy the entire ecosystem of the Gulf of St. Lawrence, one of the most amazing places, diverse places for a number of species and fisheries that people rely on, like the people like Mi'kmaq fishers rely on. People came together that day to have a water ceremony and say, we need to protect the Gulf of St. Lawrence. For hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, Mi'kmaq people and other people have relied on it as a source of food, but also a place that ensured them an ability to live in their territory and be prosperous and enjoy the resources that are there. And also the Gulf of St. Lawrence is also in danger of global warming because it's heating up larger than most other bodies of water. And I think that needs to be protected. Water is where we evolved from and came out of the water. I really am privileged to know people like Eliza Knockwood, who's a water protector, and all these other people who are there to basically sustain water for everyone. And I think people are getting it. When people know about what's happening with water and its pollution, people want to protect it. Water globally is in a short supply and needs to be protected. And the lesson I've learned from Maude Barlow and others is that we're all in this fight together to sustain a blue planet and make sure that water is available to everybody, not just the richest people who would buy water at the expense of everybody else. It's better to stop the pollution at a time where you can still use your water than to let these industrial processes destroy your water supply for short-term gain when you're looking at protecting water for the next 7 generations and beyond.
Thank you, CUPE, for providing that video. Leo passed into 2023, but his soul is with us, and may his life be a blessing. There's going to be a poll to try and get some thoughts from you as well. It's going to come up in a minute. The Council of Canadians is a membership-driven and funded organization. 90% of our funding comes from individuals like you, giving donations, monthly donations, annual donations, sometimes first-time donations. So there's going to be a poll in a second. And as I'm waiting for that, the next section is going to be around what's happening with water today. We've heard some history. We've had some, when people registered, we got some questions from folks from Rob Murray in Nova Scotia and Miriam McFarquhar. The broader question, will the U.S. ignore Great Lakes agreements and the agreements about the Yukon River and Columbia River? And a kind of second part of that is Trump makes it sound as it's simple to turning on a tap. How difficult and costly will it be to take on huge water diversion projects? And then from Pauline Bro, is there any action being taken now to have water declared a living thing that cannot be owned by other countries? And from Carmen Catelier, we Sisters of the Holy Names have been protecting water for many years as a corporate stance. How can other Canadians be emboldened to take similar action? And those are some of the questions that are going to inform this next round, which is really about what our panel sees with water today. But maybe I'm going to start with Gabrielle to just tell us a little bit about the body of water in Quebec that was designated as a living being, and then open it up to the panel, and I'll go to Angela after that. Yep, you're good.
Okay, thanks. Yeah. So there's actually two projects in Quebec aimed at granting a legal status to bodies of water. The first one is the river in in Quebec that you named, the Magpie River, and that project was successful. The other one is the St. Lawrence River, which is also partly in Quebec, depending on where you start from, and has not worked out yet. So the idea of declaring water as a right-bearing entity is based on two premises. The first is to adopt a more holistic, inclusive, and less anthropocentric perspective on our relationship with water. So it kind of means that you treat that body of water in particular kind of as a child. So you become its guardian and you're responsible to represent and defend its interests. And the second premise is to consider water and environmental degradation as a violation of the rights of the legal entity. So currently we assessed environmental impacts on various projects based on government-established environmental standards. But if a natural environment affected by, let's say, an industrial project were considered a legal entity with rights, such as a river's right to flow freely, well, that would allow the evaluation of cumulative impacts from all sources of pollution that could violate the nature's right. And in this sense, we consider nature right kind of to be treated similarly to human rights. So the recognition of legal entities, though, varies greatly from jurisdictions. We have examples that usually come to mind from rivers in India and Colombia, and also the Pachamama in Ecuador and Bolivia, where their legal status is integrated into the national constitution, and that gives those natural entities a really, really strong protection. But in the case of the Magpie River in Quebec, there are no provincial or federal legislation that recognize that legal status. So instead, it was declared through a joint resolution by a regional county and the Band Council of the Innu Nation. So it means that the legal status technically only applies within those specific territories. And of course, that recognition and that resolution sets a precedent, and it poses a significant embarrassment for developers to go through with any kind of project. But if there was to be a legal dispute, there would not be any legal recognition of the Magpie River, like it wouldn't hold up in a court. So that's kind of where we are in Canada.
Great, thank you. Angela, do you want to talk today about how CUPE sees the current struggles in water? And then I'll ask Garry and then go to Maude.
Sure. So there's the ongoing struggle to maintain public ownership of water and wastewater. And there is the water is life. There's the indigenous communities' right to having clean wastewater as well. So those are both parts of CUPE's work. What I'm watching right now is, so as Maude said, in NAFTA, water isn't necessarily protected. In the interprovincial trade deal that we have, so there's been this kind of obsession with getting rid of barriers to interprovincial trade. Well, what barriers to interprovincial trade really are these exceptions to the trade deal. And in our interprovincial trade deal, we have a really good exception for water. And it says that the parties recognize that water in its natural state, including lakes, rivers, reservoirs, water basins, is not subject to the terms of the agreement, and that it is not a good or a product. And so that is kind of the first step to protecting it as a living thing, right? It's not a good or a product. It's not something that you should be able to buy or sell. So we have that in the interprovincial trade deal. So what I'm watching is to make sure that nobody tries to remove it as a barrier to trade. We also have it a little, not quite as good a protection in our European trade deal. So maintaining that, making sure that that doesn't go away, because a lot of European multinational corporations do own water. And that's one of the things that they wanted in the CETA trade deal, was to be able to come over and buy our municipal water services. And then the CUSMA trade agreement that we have with the United States is up for renegotiation. And so just watching to make sure that there's nothing that happens in that renegotiation where we give away any of our rights to water. So what I'm watching really right now is those trade deals, and then making sure that municipalities are able to defend their right to publicly maintain their water supplies.
Great, thank you, Angela. Garry, what do you see as water struggles today?
Statham Territory is a beautiful place, but it's been ravaged by mining, hydroelectric development, railway development, logging, deforestation. So what the tribe here has done is developed a land use plan and the tribal code. The land use plan recognizes the grizzly bear as the apex predator. So when you look at it that way, what does a grizzly bear need to be healthy? What does he need in his habitat? So it's got a pretty expansive territory. So if the grizzly bears are doing fine, then everything else should be doing fine. But they can't. I mean, the grizzly bear can't fight legislation, right? So that's up to us, the ones that have the voice and can pick up a pen or a phone. So we've developed plans where buffer zones, bigger buffer zones around rivers and streams, because here the provincial ministries have been gutted. Some offices have been shut down, and everything's been regionalized to larger, bigger centers. So small towns and municipalities don't have the wherewithal or don't have the capacity to look at some of the plans that are out there. So we go ourselves and look at the plan, sit down with the logging companies or mining companies or whichever third-party interest is coming into the territory and wanted to do some development, and then sit down with them, explain our plan, our view of the world and our principles, and try to meet somewhere in the middle. So that's what we're doing here.
Great, thanks. And Maude, one of the questions is about the Columbia River and the Yukon River and Trump's kind of views of how he can just turn on a tap. Can you give us a little bit of a sense of that?
For sure. Excuse me. First of all, I'd just like to say that the story about the Magpie River has been put into a wonderful documentary called I Am Magpie, and you can get it on CBC Gem. And also, I noticed that there are a number of American friends on this call, and I want to say hello to you. We know that you are not Trump and Trump is not you, and we have our own Trumps here in Canada. So really, really wonderful to have you. Yeah, I do want to speak to this issue of what does Donald Trump want and how does he think he's going to get it. He says, first of all, that Canada has tons of water. Well, this is not true. You know, you'll read all over the place that we have 20% of the world's water, but you have to drain every lake and river for that to be true. We have about 6.5 to 7% of the water that you can use without damaging the source. And we are, almost every part of Canada is experiencing serious drought every single summer. And as you know, we've had these terrible fires. I mean, it would be just disrupting. I mean, nature put water where it belongs. it would be totally disrupting whole ecosystems to be moving massive amounts of water, and particularly if you think of it just for commercial purposes. So he's wrong on that. He also says there's a large faucet. I think he has the Columbia River Treaty in his mind, because he talked about it being up there in the West. But as you know, that water, there was an agreement so that there wouldn't be so much water going into the US because it was flooding them every year. And there was a lot of destruction of indigenous lands and farms and so on. It is being renegotiated now, but not to Trump's liking. What I think he's probably thinking more about now is the Great Lakes. And he's the only way he really could get access to this water is either annexing Canada, which I think he's deadly serious about. I don't think there's any question that somehow in his mind this is possible, is to build huge energy intensive projects to send it south the way we had those projects, the Grand and the Nawapa and so on. Or he could help himself to the Great Lakes. And this is really important. There was a compact that was signed in 2005. Now, there were two compacts, one on the Canadian side, one on the American. And on the American side, all 8 states have to agree to any diversion off the lakes. And we have no say in it, but we're supposed to we're allowed to say what we think, but we don't have a vote. All Trump would have to do is, where he signs those things and holds it up, all he'd have to do is say that compact's dead and I'm going to come in and take the water that I want. He's also threatened to, and yes, I just want to say we also have agreements to stop this, like the 2013 Boundary Waters Treaty Act, but this is not a man who cares a bit about treaties or the rule of law. And we know what a lot of people are talking about, a revived CUSMA and so on. I don't know how much time we should be spending on that with him, because he doesn't honor these agreements. And I can see him saying, I don't care what it says. I don't care what we signed. Most distressingly, he has talked about redrawing the border so he controls a greater portion of the Great Lakes. I believe he wants to use economic threats to force Canadian politicians, and maybe with a lot of business leaders saying we have to do this, to use our water as a bargaining chip. And I fear that there are those who would do just that, and that has to be our task now. But I think we need to take his threats very, very seriously. And we have friends and allies on the American side, American tribes, American environmental and community groups that are just as worried about the Great Lakes as we are on our side of the Great Lakes. And it's very important to know that the funding for Great Lakes protection is being gutted on the American side. So we have great allies to work with our American friends to stop this.
Great, thanks for that. And I remember being with some friends who were auto workers in Windsor that went across to Detroit with you taking water some years ago, and it was really a high point of their involvement in this fight. Indeed, I know we did.
We brought big buckets of gallons of Canadian public water as a gift to our friends in Detroit, and we got stopped by security at the border, the American security, and they knew we were coming, and they gave us a real hard time. It was wild. It was really a show of solidarity, though. It meant a lot to all of us.
For sure. Now, we just put up the results of the poll. 25% of people actually on this call were part of Idle No More protests. That's a wonderful numbers, more than 100 people on this call. There's going to be another poll shortly. And as we move into the next section, which is about what's the future of the water struggles, there's a couple of questions that had come in from people on the call. One from Laurent Côté. Comment envisagez-vous la protection de l'eau? That's for Gabrielle, of course. How do you see the protection of water? And then a similar one from Sheila Toussaint of Calgary. What are 3 things we can do to protect our water and Canada's sovereignty and encourage family and friends to do? So those are questions, but maybe in your answer, you might frame a little bit of that. What do you see about the future struggles for water? And why don't I start with Garry and then go to Gabrielle. And there's a poll up right now. What's the most important water issue for you in the federal election? So please.
Here in the Chatham territory, we talk about our Aboriginal title, but it also comes with the inherent responsibilities comes with those rights. So we, like I said, we have to protect the grizzly bear in his habitat or her habitat, because if the grizzly bears are suffering, then we're going to suffer. In 2023, I joined a group of people on the Fraser River because the water levels were low. So it meant that there were some areas that the fish couldn't get up. So we had thousands of fish stranded in pools on the Fraser River. So we didn't see the Department of Fisheries and Oceans coming to the rescue. So we went down there with baskets and nets and hand bombed fish over some impasses. I think in 2 weeks we did about 6,500 salmon. Not a lot, but it's better than not doing anything at all. So I think be vigilant, be aware, write letters, op-eds, and if need be prepared for direct action.
And who did I say was next? Why don't we go with Angela and then Maude and then Gabrielle. Angela, the future struggles.
The future struggles. Yeah, I mean, I think the future struggles are very, very similar to what we're doing now. Water is so important. And I think, like, looking to the past about how we came together, how community groups came together, how there was national leadership and local action. That's what I'm hoping that we see in the future to protect all of our right to keeping water public, clean, and improving the rights that we have to water rather than stepping back.
Okay, Maude.
Well, there are a number of organizations and individuals who are doing some talking now, just very worried about the threat of Trump to annexing Canada and annexing the Great Lakes or whatever. And we're talking about the need to, we're probably going to have an election called maybe as early as this Sunday. And so we're going to have just over a month. And I think it's very important that we put this issue on the table. And I think we need to get a letter. We were looking at sign-on letters, petitions, those terrific no-way buttons, polls, and so on. We really need to give people a way to express their concern, because in my experience with water is that it's very deeply personal. When we fought the Energy East pipeline, we talk about climate change and all of that, but what really got people is when they looked outside their window and we said, that's the pipeline that will carrying natural gas now, will be carrying the dirtiest energy on earth. And do you know what it will do to your water? It's very, very personal. Water is very, very personal. So we need to say to all the political parties, but I would say to everyone who's saying that they want to be a member of parliament, do you promise us? Do you pledge you will not use water as a bargaining chip? This all must be done against the backdrop of respecting and defending Indigenous inherent and treaty rights and land claims. This is a bulwark against any intrusion into water rights in Canada, and it's a very important alliance. And it also means fighting those in our country who would sell out or abuse water for profit and already have. Trump or no Trump, and this is really important, in a world running out of clean, accessible, fresh water, we in Canada have a very important role in protecting it. I quote T. Boone Pickens, the big energy czar, who's dead now, but he says, because he got into the water business, there's people who want to buy it and people who want to sell it. That's the guts, blood, and feathers of the thing. I mean, this is where we are, and we have a responsibility to look after this sacred gift.
Thanks. And Gabrielle, a few weeks ago, you made a call to Maude from Eau Secours saying something's going on. We better bring some folks together. Tell us a little bit about why you made that phone call and what's come out of that up to now.
Yeah, actually, it was it's a bit funny. It was my boss who made the call to Maude because she has a better contact with Maude. But her English is less good than mine, which is already, you've seen it so far. Some words are harder than others. And so I've kind of taken over that. So it's now more our idea together, but originally came from someone else. But yeah, so it all seems like it's too big for us. These questions are just overwhelming, and we don't know what to take. We don't know what to take for real. We don't know what's serious or whatnot. And so first thing we wanted to do was kind of regroup and unite and think about it with a lot of heads, because it's crucial to have a large number of people reflecting on this and the possible course of action. And we're also we don't want to give in to panic. There's like this widespread of panic. And at this moment, President Trump is making really outrageous, but also vague allegations, not accusation. But there are no concrete plans, there are no executive orders that are like on the verge of being adopted. And the medias are responding so strongly on this. For every comment that Trump's make, there's about 6 media articles. So we kind of want to calm down and look at what's really happening. So we've ordered a legal analysis because, like Angela said, we're looking at what's being done, and we have to look at all kinds of bilateral treaties and overseas I'm looking for my words, but all kinds of treaties, sorry, that are too much for us, and we don't know the specifics of any of it. So really, how can you do this if we said he'd respect the rule of law? Let's say he does. So yeah, we want to not panic and bring together groups. And so far, it's pretty good. There's a large number of us, and we're meeting frequently. And I think we're gonna get involved with either together or as some of us together, smaller groups. We're gonna like Maude said, make sure to reach out to a representative and any candidates in the upcoming election and make sure that water is, because it's going to be an issue, it's going to be a subject. So we want to make sure that we can give out as much information as we can.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Gabrielle. And John, I just want to say that's what we did, as you'll remember, way back when we put together these coalitions. And I remember particularly with CUPE and the council, we would have great big, huge events of members from both our organizations, but just the general public, because people cared so much. And I'm hearing from a lot of people who are saying, what can I do? What can I do? I feel helpless. And so, as Gabrielle says, we want to be ready. We don't want to panic, but we want to be ready if the time comes. But there is an election coming, and this is a time to get a pledge from our politicians. We need to know where they stand.
Mm-hmm. And Gabrielle, thanks for Eau Secours for reaching out, because you saw the threat of Trump and you said we need allies. And in a minute, we're going to ask the panelists to think of a question you want to ask another panelist here, just to help bring up this conversation. As you're thinking about that, I want to cast my own mind back to 2000 and 2001, when the mayor of Toronto, Mel Lastman, undertook a plan to privatize $19 billion worth of water assets in Toronto, our water and sewage treatment plant. And they kept saying to us, listen, we've got the votes at council. You can make all the noise you want. We've got the votes to move this through. And the water lobbyists were floating around like vultures in the city. But we put together an amazing coalition of labor, of the Council of Canadians, of environmental organizations. We got a legal opinion from Steve Schreiben at the time that said, if you do this and privatize it under NAFTA, you can't, bring it all back in. And from the construction trades, where I come from, because if it was going to be built publicly, it was going to be built with good union standards and people have decent apprenticeships and decent careers. So we put a tremendous coalition together, and we just kept knocking on doors and going to the media and going to meetings. And finally, the mayor's office had to come to us and said, here's a motion to say we won't privatize. It's good enough for you to support it. And of course, those victories are very sweet. Nick is going to talk a little bit about some of the things that we want to be doing and some of the bringing people together to talk about the politics of the day, including what is, what's on people's mind with water. He's also going to just mention some of the water events that are happening this Saturday for World Water Day. So I'm going to turn it over to Nick Barishaw and then come back to the group to be thinking about what's that question you want to ask somebody else on the panel. Nick, go ahead.
All right. Thanks for the introduction, John. Thanks to all the panelists and to everyone who's here. It's really amazing to have over 500 people on the call. And I think, you know, one of the things that we're constantly looking to do is to encourage and give people a chance, ways to get involved. We've been having a lot of meetings with people lately, and you know, the turnout like this call has been incredible. And so I think people are feeling, I don't know why it's coming to me in French, the urgence d'agir, you know, the desire to act. And so we are going to put up a poll in a minute, asking you, you know, what are some of the ways you can intervene, you can get involved. I think that's our next poll. And one of the things that the council has been doing is we've been getting organized with a group of researchers who are looking into the stances and the connections of different political actors into this coming into this election. And so we're going to post in the chat a link where you can sign up to join a signal group. So this is a group where we'll be sharing shareable, like social media shareables. So if you're someone who is active on social media, if you're often on social media sharing things, this could be one of the ways in which you could get involved, because we are up against the algorithms, we are up against Elon Musk, and this is one of the ways in which we can push back by kind of having a concerted effort. And so these are some instructions here on the slide you see next to me, just to get that information out. Another way, and we'll post that in the chat in a minute, how to a link that will guide you through all this. Another thing that we're doing is we have been organizing and training people up to host conversations as a first step towards intervening in the election. Kitchen table conversations. We have about 65 people already across Canada who are organizing these conversations, and this is an opportunity where it's really the first step, and these are already going ahead, and we're going to be having more trainings in the future. And so this is an opportunity to intervene in the election, because I think one of the things that we've seen that's clear is that we need to first understand the kind of corporate agenda that is threatening our water, that is threatening the climate, that is threatening people's living conditions, and get on the same page collectively. And so this is what these conversations allow people to do. And lastly, I would say we should really get involved with, there are a number of World Water Day events that are being hosted by chapters. And so I just want to mention a few of those that our chapters and our allies are hosting coming up on World Water Day, which is March 22nd. So in Newfoundland, at the St. John's Farmers Market, the Avalon chapter, the Council of Canadians, is going to be there from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. And they'll have materials on blue schools, etc. So you can come and check that out if you happen to be in St. John's. In Calgary, the Calgary chapter is going to have a table at a World Water Day event at the Arusha Center at the Central Library, and that's also on March 22nd. In Hamilton, our chapter will be tabling at a public forum on water justice. The event is called Water, a Right, Asset, or Commodity. And so that's at 12 p.m. Saturday, March 29th at the First Unitarian Church. And I know I'm throwing a lot of information at you. This will be posted in the chat. So if you're worried it's gonna breeze by too quickly, don't worry, this will be in the chat. Trying to get my text back. Okay, I lost the page with.
Oh, we can put the rest of that up on the.
Yeah, we can put the rest in the. My apologies. I'll let you get back to the panel. Really enjoying the discussion so far. Take it away, John, please.
Thanks, Nick. And look for those in the chat. And if you know of a World Water Day event happening this weekend in your community, please put it in the chat and we can promote it and let other people know about that. So a question that you would have for somebody else in the panel. Why don't we start with Angela and then Garry? Ask a question to whoever you want on the panel.
So my question would be for Maude, and I'm just wondering, as we're facing this sort of very monumental struggle, it feels like a very pivotal moment what advice would you give? What do you think the secret to the success of previous movements around this has been?
Well, thanks, Angela. I've never been involved in anything that didn't need the time to get people agreeing on the language and the goal and shared values and a shared analysis. We don't have a lot of time here, or we may have lots of time. Trump may get interested in some other shiny object and this will go away, but we may not have time. So that my fear is that we're not going to have time to go through that process because it's invaluable. But I do think that something is bringing people together in this country. Not an ugly nationalism, you know, who cares about the rest of the world, not that at all, but rather that the values that we on this call and others like us share must be protected. And to take the time to seek out those allies is incredibly important. I just know from experience, people care about this issue. They care about the environment. They care about justice. They care about workers' rights. They care about Indigenous rights. Let's bring those together and rebuild a movement because it's time.
Garry, what question do you have, sir? Somebody else in the panel?
Yeah, question for Gabrielle. What type of outreach work is happening with the Cree and the Innu in Quebec? And how has it been going?
What type of what, sorry?
Outreach work and solidarity work?
With the Innu Council specifically?
Innu and the Cree.
Oh, you want to talk? I'm sorry. You want to talk about the James Bay Treaty?
Whatever type of work Eau Secours is doing with the tribes.
With Indigenous people, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know the Cree Nation. I don't. They're really far away, so I don't work with them very often. I don't think I have that many interesting answers. The work with Indigenous here, we have. It really depends. It's very contact based for our organizations here. So we have a few people that we work with, and we invite them as much as possible, and we rely on them to relay the invitations and to get involved. Like they have larger contacts. But we don't work specifically with like a band council or whatnot to call out for action.
Okay. Maude, what question would you have for somebody else?
Well, I have a question for Garry. Garry and I had a dear friend, Art Manuel, who's sadly died a few years ago. Garry, I don't know if you remember, but Art's father worked with my father getting rid of capital and corporal punishment in Canada, if you can believe it. So that I met him way before I met Art when I was a little girl. And George Manuel was in my house. But if you could talk about, Garry, how we came together through this analysis of what these free trade agreements were doing, how they were removing rights of people, and particularly in this case, Indigenous rights, or attempting to do that through agreements that gave much more power to corporations, and how we first came together and the role that art played in bringing us together.
Yeah, Art is supposed to go on a trip with Maude to Bolivia to do some outreach work with the people in South America, and he said he couldn't go, so he asked me to go, and hung up the phone. I had to call back and say, Art, where's Bolivia? Because I've never traveled internationally before. But Art had been busy at the time preparing an amicus curiae brief, and he was arguing that as much as the United States is arguing that they are subsidizing, they're getting a huge subsidy by buying American or Canadian softwood products. Art is arguing that there is indeed a big subsidy being given because there's nothing being given to the Aboriginal people whose lands the wood has been taken from. So, and the argument is successful. Unfortunately, we couldn't convince our own national organizations to get on board with that and take up the argument in the way that Art wanted to. So it's an ongoing battle. It's not over yet. So Art's work is still carried on.
But we went to Bolivia, if you remember, and I remember standing on a hilltop in El Alto, and you played the drum, you played a water song, and every beautiful young woman swooned about you, Garry. I have to tell you, I remember that.
Okay, it's not fair to embarrass anybody here, Maude. Gabrielle, what question would you have for somebody else in the panel?
Well, my question is for Angela. So, as a social mobilization organization, we believe that the key is to form alliance, and we've talked about making alliances across border. So, I'm just wondering if you guys know any good example of a successful alliance that's been done before around ideally water struggle, but any supportive public services that we could take away lessons and key lessons from. Yeah.
Yeah, so CUPE is part of an organization called Public Services International. And we have worked together in the first NAFTA and when NAFTA was being renegotiated for CUSMA. We had a tri-national conference in Mexico where Canadian and American and Mexican trade unionists met and talked and did that work that Maude was talking about, trying to develop relationships and come up with shared values where we could push for stronger labor protections in the CUSMA deal. And we actually were able to get, I think, some really important labor protections and advancements in that deal because of those connections and relationships that we had across the labor movement in those three countries. And we are hoping to have those conversations and do more of that work as Donald Trump is kind of threatening. And my concern is not just Donald Trump, it's how we respond to it as well, right? And so making sure that workers, that human rights, that water and nature and all of those natural resources are protected, and we don't sort of throw away our values when this in response to Trump, and that we say, oh, it's okay because we're fighting him. We have to give up this water. We have to do this, right? That we are able to maintain our values and build that cross-national solidarity, because again, that nationalism is also a concern where we're on the side of workers in the United States who are being laid off by the federal government right now. Like, we want to be in solidarity with those public sector workers. We want to be in solidarity with workers in Mexico who are facing the same kinds of threats that we are. So building that movement and having those relationships, I think, is really important.
Thank you for that. Is there a poll result we can put up now from the last poll? And as we're doing that, I'm just going to there's some of the things people are willing to do, and that's it's pretty important for us to think about that, including donation. I'm going to come back to that in a second. People often say, this is really hard time. What do we do? How can we possibly make a difference? And back in November, I wrote an article in the Council of Canadians on our website in November about how do we take on Trump. And I said, sometimes we need to look back and ask the ancestors. And the people I mentioned in that included Tommy Douglas, who everybody thinks about as Medicare, Agnes MacPhail, who was the first woman member of Parliament, Jean Augustine, the first Black cabinet minister in Canada, Sharon Gill, who organized farm workers in British Columbia, Art Manuel, and Marie Sinclair. Because our ancestors can tell us how we mobilize, how we organize, how we have to take up a popular movement against incredible odds. And so, my friends, as we're starting to come to the end of this, I want to ask you to do a couple things. One is to consider joining the Council of Canadians. It was formed 40 years ago. It was about defending the public good in the face of incredible corporate greed and the determination to integrate our economy and our society into that of the US. And we've seen how that free trade agenda has made us so much more vulnerable, and how water and other things and the public good is so much threatened at this point in time. We need your help to take on this challenge, and we got to start a major fight about this. And Maude mentioned we are probably going to create something that says to the politicians, do not dare put water as a bargaining chip in this next period of time. It's far too important for that. We want to make sure that we have the capacity to do that as the Council of Canadians. That includes money. And we always have to ask people for money because 90% of the council, we don't get money from governments. We get it from allies and from individuals like you. So we're going to put in the chat a link where you could make a donation. And, you know, one-time donation is great. And going even a little further and making a monthly donation is what sustains organizations through these tough times. We've been for 40 years. And I'm amazed at the number of people who said to me in this last while, you know what? With Trump there, with what they're saying to our country, with what they're telling us, this is what the council was built for, to fight for the Canada we want. And as Angela said, it's not a narrow nationalism. It's the Canada we want, built on truth and reconciliation, built on welcoming people from around the world, and built on creating a future that is truly sustainable and respectful for every person who lives in these places. So I'd ask you, we can put up in the chat there the link to donate to the Council of Canadians. And then I'm going to ask our panel to just maybe a minute, 2 minutes in your wrap up. And we're going to start with Angela, then Garry, then Gabrielle, and then end with Maude, of course. So Angela, go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks for having this, and I've really enjoyed the conversation. I'm a lot more hopeful. I think that there is definitely an appetite for people who want to be able to do something to fight for the Canada that we want. And one thing about this issue is that it does bring so many things together. It brings Indigenous rights together. It brings workers' rights together. It brings it's very local. People are very concerned about it because it's in their communities. And so I'm very hopeful about the possibilities of this movement being the foundation for a broader movement around the Canada that we want. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Garry.
Thanks for the opportunity. It's good to see everyone. Great to see Maude and so many other names coming across the screen. I think going forward, we need to blow some horns. We need to make some noise, especially because it's I know people are tired. I know people are anxious, but we've got to dig in and like Mike Myers said, elbows up, and let each other know what's going on, so you don't feel so isolated. Because there's many times when you're in the middle of a struggle, it feels like you're all alone. But if we connect from one side of the country to the other, and we'll be stronger and be louder and more visible and can't be ignored. Thank you.
Thanks, Garry. Gabrielle?
Yeah, and a great way to fight anxiety is to get involved and do something. So yeah, it's gonna echo with what's been said before, but join organizations, become members, subscribe to newsletters, so you're informed and you're ready to react. And donations really do go a long way. And for friends in Quebec and Montreal, I've seen a few names. We do have an event Saturday morning. It's going to be filled with hope and a good way of seeing things, a good way to remember that we can do lots of things when we unite and we gather together. So hope to see you there. And thank you so much to Council of Canadians for hosting this.
And thank you to CUPE for initiating this most recent conversation with us, because it's been really important. Many Indigenous voices around that table that you and Maude are now hosting. And Maude, what comes to your mind now? What would you like to say to people as we wrap up this wonderful evening?
Thank you, John, and thank you, everyone. I think the big issue here is for us to keep hope alive and to support each other with that hope. And I borrowed a term in a book I wrote on hope from an American activist. Joan Halifax is her name, and she works with men on death row. So you can imagine she has something to say about hope. And she says that she calls it wise hope. Wise hope means you're not pretending things aren't what they are. You look them in the face and you deal with them, but you still do something. And so for me, hope is seeing things clearly, or as Margaret Atwood says, the world seen clearly is seen through tears. Why ask me then what is wrong with my eyes, which I think is gorgeous. So you see the world through tears, and you still put your hand out and you touch it in a way that you can make a difference. And here's the important thing. You have to have faith that others are doing the same. You can't know who they are, you can't know all of them, but you have to have faith that you're not by yourself trying to put an antidote to the poison into our world. And so I'm just going to end with two quotes. One is from the late, great Carl Sagan. He said, anything else you are interested in is not going to happen if you cannot breathe the air and drink the water. Don't sit this one out. Do something. You are, by accident of fate, alive at an absolutely critical moment in the history of our planet. He was wonderful, and those words are to live by. And the last little quick quote is from Banksy, the wonderful street artist in England. He says, if you're tired, learn to rest, not to quit.
Wow. And that's the right thing that we all got to know. Thank you, our panel. Thank you, Garry, Maude, Angela, Gabrielle. Thank you for the staff who did all the hard work of hosting this thing. Eagle Claw, Nick, Dylan, and Daria, and Pam for helping to do this. Thank you, all of you, for spending your time with us, for caring enough. Water is life, and we know that. And please support this work going forward. Once we get the petition going, sign that petition, share it with friends. If you know you've got some friends that want to celebrate World Water Day on this weekend, please do so. Canadians.org, please get involved. Please join. Please give us some financial support so we can publicize this issue and so many other issues that are crucial to people, planet, and democracy. Thanks all. Have a good night. Merci. À bientôt.